Okay. Then again, namaste. Welcome everyone. Thank you, Adam and Sabina from Kriya Yoga for inviting me to share something about tapas. And I would like to start with a poem by Rumi. It's titled The Oven's Question. I'm a black cumin seeds thrown in the fire of your beauty. I live inside this fire. It is my home. This arrow being drawn back in a bow made of flame. When a lover burns, he becomes the beloved. Whoever enters this becomes a soul. Your sword has opened my chest. Sparks jump over, one who is already burned completely up. The pain of love is fire. Make my dry wood ache to catch. Some souls are like jasmine growing inside flame. Others are roses thriving there. Only Abraham speaks the language fire speaks. He comes like smoke riding up out of the fire. The rains of flame turning to smoke in his hands. I have heard him in the early morning, telling me to leap out of the world's fire into his fire. Now the oven of my heart keeps asking, how long do I have to talk with flame language about burning and being burned? How long? And I've chosen this poem because tapas can be translated as fire, as heat. It's also commonly used in the sense of asceticism or austerity. But indeed, the Sanskrit root, it comes from the Sanskrit word tap, T-A-P, and this means heat or to burn. So it definitely refers to fire, to heat. And from a formal point of view, or the way I practice, or many people practice, tapas is an act of making a commitment to perform a particular practice for a specific amount of time. So the meaning of tapas is, in a more widely common used sense, it's an intensive spiritual practice or spiritual discipline. It can also stand for long, intense meditation, depending on from which spiritual tradition you come. For example, if you're not coming from the yoga tradition, just from a meditative approach, then tapas means also long, intense meditation sessions, retreats. And tapas is part of the 5 niyamas, which are mentioned in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, this classical text upon yoga. And the niyamas are dealing with some with moral restraints in the sense of discipline, of modesty. So it's an interaction with the inner world. And I like to quote Patanjali, chapter 2, verse 43. It's said there, so in the translation, and I'm using the comment from Georg Feuerstein, a very well known and scholar on Patanjali, or in general on yoga. He says, Patanjali says, through austerity, on account of the dwindling of impurity, perfection of the body and the sense organs is gained. So he's talking about the vanishing of impurities. And this is also, we have to see this sutra in the context Patanjali speaking, because before he is already speaking about saucha, which means purity. And he regards purity or saucha as very important, because it's also a lucidity factor of our consciousness. So saucha, purity, brings one-pointedness, clarity, concentration, and in a final way, it leads to self-realization. And now maybe the question arises, how do we gain saucha? How do we become pure? And I'm using this word in the translation, maybe in another context that we normally understand pure. It's a spiritual purity. So how do we gain saucha, purity? And Patanjali says by a sattvic way of life. So by cultivating sattvic tendencies. And this could be a whole lecture on itself. I'm just mentioning this. But one way to reach saucha or to cultivate such sattvic tendencies is also through tapas. So also, which can be, for example, an intensive spiritual practice. So a daily intensive spiritual practice. But also maybe some longer practices like retreats. For example, here in Vairagya Yoga, we have Module 1 retreats or 1 month long retreats. So with a very, let's say, tight schedule, which can be seen as an intensive spiritual practice. But you can also perform some conscious ascetic practices like fasting, having once a week a fasting day, or keeping every day for a certain amount or for a certain period mauna, noble silence, so not speaking, the calmness of the mind. Or once in a while doing an all-night ritual, staying awake in prayer and meditation. But all this needs to be done, so the intensive spiritual practice or these conscious ascetic practices need to be done in a healthy and sattvic way. And we'll talk about this later a bit more. And you can also do some other things that can be regarded as tapas, which lead to purity, to saucha, is something like some little things you can bring in your daily life. For example, you eat 1 month, you don't eat salt for 1 month, or no sugar, or you decide to shower cold, or if you live in a country where you heat a bit less, or you don't use the car, you go on foot. So all these things that bring you out of your comfort zone, in a sattvic way, in a gentle way. These can be seen also as tapas. So things which are in the beginning a bit inconvenient or maybe challenging, but then after a while, if you keep on practicing it, so if you commit to it, and if you keep up this commitment, then you will see that all these things can bring a sense of purity. And you will see this if you practice every day for 1 month certain practices, things might change. And also in general, doing things you don't like is not only a way to purify your being, but also it brings freedom. And it takes away fear, because if you are not afraid of doing things, or if it's not about clinging to pleasure or avoiding pain, which is also both are part of the five glaciers, the five causes of suffering, raga and devesha, clinging to pleasure and avoiding pain. So if you are not afraid of this, of any situation, of anything you do, this brings a lot of freedom. Coming back to Patanjali, we also have to see, so I was quoting in chapter 2, verse 43, through austerity, on account of the twinkling of impurity, have perfection of the body and the sense organs is gained. But we have to see the context of the chapter. Patanjali he is approaching the whole Yoga Sutra in a very systematic way. So we have to see the context of the chapter. And chapter 2 is about sadhana, which is spiritual practice in general. But literally translated, it means path to realization. Because in the beginning, in the first chapter, Patanjali, he starts with the essential. He starts already with samadhi. And then afterwards, so if you can't go to samadhi directly, which most of us obviously can't, then he's referring in the second chapter to the path towards realization, towards samadhi. And the second chapter it's a composite of two independent traditions, namely the so-called Ashtanga Yoga, or the Eightfold Path, in which context Patanjali is quoted quite a lot. To some surprise of some scholars, also Feuerstein says it's not only the Eightfold Path, but it's also Kriya Yoga. And when I'm talking about the Eightfold Path, it's like Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So the steps towards Samadhi, which can be seen as let's say, as a manual how to reach Samadhi. And like I said, in the first chapter, he already speaks about Samadhi. So he says, go there directly. And if you can't, then you have to keep on reading my sutras. And in the second chapter, I will show you and I will talk to you about the path that should be followed to reach Samadhi. And some scholars say that maybe the Eightfold Path, so this Ashtanga Yoga, that a part of the chapter 2 could be a kind of copy of something that was already known to this time. And I don't want to go deeper now in some text studying, but it highlights the other point as well. So he's not only talking about the Eightfold Path, about the Ashtanga Yoga, but also about Kriya Yoga. And Kriya Yoga can be divided in three cardinal techniques. So he says in chapter 2, so right at the beginning, verse 1, he says, ascesis, self-study, and devotion to the Lord constitute Kriya Yoga. Constitute Kriya Yoga. So Kriya Yoga can be divided into these three cardinal techniques. So it's tapas, svadhyaya, ishvara, pranidhana. So asceticism, self-study, and devotion to the Lord. Okay. And we also have to see that Kriya Yoga as a system or as a spiritual discipline is also divided in, or let's say it's resting on two poles, on two pillars, which are the fundament of every yogic practice. And these two pillars is Abhyasa and Vairagya. So Abhyasa is practice. It's constant repetition. And Vairagya is dispassion or detachment. So the way in which we practice, which can be seen as the two wings of the bird. And also to mention, maybe it's good to mention that Kriya Yoga. Kriya is yoga. Probably you know means union, and Kriya means can be translated as action. So Kriya Yoga is also the yoga of action, of doing something. Yeah. And Vairagya is then can also be divided in Apara Vairagya and Para Vairagya, so relative absolute renunciation. And this is already mentioned before. He's already in chapter 1, verse 12. Patanjali talks about Abhyasa and Vairagya, and he says this brings quietness of the mind. So they are the basis of every yoga practice, because yoga should bring this quietness of the mind, dissolution of the fluctuation of the mind. So we have in Kriya Yoga these two poles, Abhyasa and Vairagya. And Abhyasa, or constant repetition practice, is also, it subsumes three means of Kriya Yoga: Tapas, Svadhyaya, and Ishvara. So we see that tapas does not refer to any specific exercise, but it's a formal category, like Abhyasa and Vairagya. So it, more or less, we can say it includes everything that falls outside of Svadhyaya, self-study, and Ishvara Pranidhana, devotion to the Lord. And maybe a potential reason, I don't know, it's speculation, but it's also based on comments of scholars, that the potential reason for not mentioning a specific method by Patanjali is that all these methods are given personally from a teacher or from a guru to the student. So he's more or less talking about a whole system, philosophy, the philosophy of Kriya Yoga. And then afterwards, what we can subsume, or what does it actually mean, tapas? This is up to the teacher, giving a tapas to a student. Okay, but maybe this is not really satisfying for everyone. So I was now referring the whole time to Patanjali and the Yoga Sutras, which I can highly recommend to everyone who is interested in yoga, no matter only in the philosophy of yoga, or also in practicing yoga. So the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are really essential for everyone who is interested in yoga. But now I will talk a bit about something more tangible. So, what does tapas means now in a more specific way? So in general, it's the fiery discipline, or the burning enthusiasm, which we need in yoga. So it means to cultivate self-discipline, passion, and an increased inner will to burn away all these impurities. And this will lead to the recognition of our true nature. And it has relevance both on the yoga mat and off the yoga mat. So the way we practice yoga, so let's say on the mat, can't be emphasized enough. It's in Hatha Yoga, it's never yoga in general, but in hatha yoga on the yoga mat, it's never about pushing ourselves in an unhealthy way, not physically and not emotionally. Sometimes it's simply enough to be able to simply make it on the mat and perform a sadhana. And this is also coming back to something more theoretically, but it's also important to mention this in the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Gods, is one of the most important ancient texts from India. It is said in chapter 17, Krishna says to Arjuna, so the whole Bhagavad Gita is dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. It said, worship of the gods, the twice born, the teachers and the wise, purity, straightforwardness, celibacy, and non-injury are called the austerities of the body. And he keeps on speaking. So he refers to tapas of the body, or austerity of the body, austerity of speech, and austerity or discipline of the mind. And he is speaking even more about tapas, and he says in which way tapas should be practiced, because you can practice tapas in an unhealthy, non-sattvic way, so in a rajasic way or in a tamasic way, or you can practice tapas in a sattvic way. And practicing tapas in a tamasic way would be to push yourself to do something unhealthy, like to have too strong fasting in a too strong way, practicing in a way not honoring your body or your physical limits. So all this shouldn't be done. And also in a rajasic way is doing tapas for your ego, for your egotic interests, for we'd like to gain more muscle, so to anything which is not really done with detachment. So all tapas should be done in a sattvic and healthy way. So in the same way we practice karma yoga with detachment, awareness, and love. And yeah, tapas is also this aspect of the inner guru, this guiding light within every one of us that encourages us to do our practice, even if we don't want or don't like doing it. It's that fire that makes us practice for the love of it. And by holding on to a commitment to tapas, we burn all ways away, all impurities. So tapas is also making the decision to go earlier to bed, to be able to get up earlier. This is part of tapas as well. Or the good feeling after doing the sadhana, which is there. This is also tapas. So it's more than only acting on the mat, it's the way you already approach acting on the mat and afterwards, and the whole, it's a mindset. It's tapas is also a consensus reality which leads us in a more and more refined way with every little step closer to the unification with the absolute, with the universe, great spirit, almighty spirit, with God, however you want to call it. And more correct to the awareness that we are one with this already. And I know in many modern traditions it's said that we are already enlightened and we simply need to realize this, and so on and so on. But in a way this is right, but like my teacher Sahaja says, the enlightenment may be instantaneous, but the deconditioning of the mind is a process. And that's why we need to perform tapas, most of us. So on a more gross or physical level, it means we do asanas we don't like, for example, or we find challenging, or we are even a bit afraid of. We have the discipline to practice these challenges consistently and without falling into negative thinking patterns like I can't do this and I don't like it and it won't work and I'm not made for doing it or whatever. But also having the sense of humility to admit that we haven't mastered the asana yet, and we keep on going to practice our tapas, our asanas in a healthy longing to go towards this perfection or mastery in the asana. And we take the tapas also off the mat. So when we, in the same way, we approach, like I just said, asanas we don't like, or we are struggling with, or which are challenging, or which makes us afraid. For example, to stand in inverse of asana, in shirshasana for 10 minutes. In the same way, we take the tapas also off the mat. So when we face any challenging situation in life, we go for it without any fear. And after a while, and also after a while of practicing tapas, we become aware that the process is happening. The ignition of the igniting of the inner fire. And speaking about tapas, about fire, maybe you remember the poem I read to the beginning, a Rumi poem about fire. So the element of fire is related and or linked with tapas. So the element of fire is very important, which is also, so it's linked to tapas and therefore also to Manipura chakra. It's linked to trust, to confidence, to willpower. And also in all spiritual traditions, fire is the element of transformation. So without fire, there is no alchemical process happening. Only the fire transforms the more and more gross energies to more refined energies. And after doing a tapas for a while, you will become aware of the transformation that is happening. It might take some time, but so yoga is not a quick fix. It's not a pill you take. It's a commitment to reality, and after committing for a while to tapas, you will see changes that are happening within your being. So you will become aware of this transformation. And this transformation will happen automatically when we allow change to happen. So we open ourselves up and we step outside of the comfort zone and into uncharted territory. And this is the intrinsic attitude of a real yogi, because it's about not knowing what's going to happen, making this whole experience in this human form an experiment, and not knowing what will be the result, but having the trust in the heart that that something, process is happening, and by doing this we will learn what we need to learn, and we meet our teachers in life in form of any challenging situations. We keep on going with our tapas, and maybe for a while it's really our only guiding star. I mean, I heard some inspiring stories about, for example, my teacher, he had also tapas for 20 years. and it doesn't matter what it was concrete. It's not about what he did, but simply to committing for 20 years to tapas, no matter what's going to happen, and you perform this tapas, even if you're at the airport, even if it's your wedding day, on the day your parents are dying, no matter what's happening, you do the tapas, and it will guide you through life. And in times that are more challenging and everything falls away, maybe the practicing of tapas in the spirit of tapas, which I mentioned before. And even if tomorrow would be the last day of the world, and doing this tapas, this brings freedom and peace, and removes any obstacles, any fear, any contraction, and we act from a place of love and not fear or ego. And of course, if we come to an edge, and talking now about more tangible things, if some asanas are challenging, and we come to the edge where we think, there could be, I can go a bit further, but not in this pushing attitude, but in this egotic way, but from this place of love, we go a bit further. And because we know we have the trust that we have this discernment, which is healthy and which is not unhealthy. Yeah, so this is the way we practice tapas. So you best is to ask someone a friend which is going with you on the yogic path, or your teacher, your guru, ask someone for tapas and then commit to it. And yeah, maybe you do some asanas so you have some asanas, a set of asanas, for example, and you perform this for a month every day. So tapas in a more concrete way can be a set of asanas, some pranayama, and a certain amount of meditation every day, and you do this for 1 month. And then you commit to another month. Maybe after the third commitment, you decide to commit for half a year to tapas. But start it in a gentle way, in a little challenging way, not too much challenging, but a bit. And then you will see the changes that are happening. If you're practicing, I don't know, half an hour, an hour, 3 hours, something, a strong sublimation practice, things are going to change within your being. We will see this. We will experience this. And this can be very inspiring to do it for a while. Yeah, and you keep on going with the tapas. Yeah, and there is much more to say, but I would like to end with some inspiring words by Swami Shivananda. He had quite a long period of life. I think it was almost 12 years where he was doing intense sadhana. So we talk about some of this kind of he was doing it really serious, like some hours a day. And I like to end with this. So in a book titled Self-Realization, Swami Shivananda, in the chapter Yoga Sadhana, he says, Om, salutations to the adorable Hari, then whom there is nothing greater and who is above all this universe. Why should you prolong your bondage unnecessarily? Why should you not attain your divine birthright now? Why should you not break your bondage now? Delay means prolongation of your sufferings. You can break it at any moment. This is in your power. Do it now. Stand up. Gird up your loins. do rigorous and vigorous sadhana and attain freedom, which is immortality and or eternal bliss. The divine within you is stronger than anything that is without you. Therefore, be not afraid of anything. Rely on your own inner self, the divinity within you. Tap the source through looking within. Improve yourself. Build your character. Purify the heart. Develop the divine virtues. Eradicate evil traits. Conquer all that is base in you. Endeavor to attain all that is worthy and noble. Make the lower nature the servant of the higher through discipline, tapas, self-restraint, and meditation. This is the beginning of your freedom. So with this, I would end this little talk, but I will stay online for some questions. I would already thank you for your presence and for being able to share this with you. So someone is asking that I was saying that tapas is everything outside of self-study and devotion to the Lord. And if someone cannot take a tapas of self-study or devotion to the Lord, of course you can. In this context, I was talking about Patanjali, the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, and about the philosophical system in which he is systematizing Kriya Yoga. But of course, you can take a tapas of self-study and to devotion of the Lord. For example, contemplating every day for 1 hour, or not defined period of time, what does Ishvara Pranidhana, devotion to the Lord, means. Of course, this can also be tapas. And of course, if you do tapas, in a way you are also doing self-study, because self-study is not only books, because you study the self, and you study also yourself. So by doing tapas, you are the experiment itself, and it's a bit like Schrödinger's cat. You are the experiment, you are the one who is aware of the experiment, you are the whole process. So it's a kind of self-study, studying the self. And of course, you practice tapas with the devotion to the Lord, with Ishvara Pranidhana. Like I said, practice, every yogic practice, let's say, should be practiced with Abhyasa and Vairagya. So this constant repetition, it's not about doing it once, but it's doing it for a long time, every day. Constant repetition, outwards detachment. And in the way we practice Karma Yoga, with detachment, awareness, and love. And it's also very beneficial and good to consecrate your tapas. So if you have tapas, your teacher gives you tapas, some asana, some pranayama, some meditation, then before you start the first time your asana, your tapas, you sit down and you consecrate it. You tune in with the heart, with yourself, and you give away the fruits of what you do to the universe, to the spiritual heart, to God. You offer it to something higher. And in this way, you practice tapas. So yes, you can also, it can be tapas to commit to self-study or to devotion to God. Thank you for the question. So stay online for one more minute. There's another question coming. I'm very happy and willing to answer, but if not, I would then slowly come to an end. And for this, I thank you all again for your presence, and I wish you a beautiful day full of love, of awareness, trust.